They looked me in the eye and said we shouldn't have had a third child. Not in anger, not in tears, just calm, like reviewing a bad investment. And the worst part? I didn't even flinch. I just reached for the scones I'd baked for them, blueberry, Dad's favorite, and watched them go untouched. Hi, I'm Lauren. For 28 years, I tried to be the quiet daughter, the peacemaker, the one who didn't ask for much, until they rewrote the family trust behind my back while I was lying in a hospital bed. But what they didn't expect was what I did next. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. I parked a few houses down, letting the engine idle longer than I needed to. The Chen house looked the same. Blue shutters, the porch swing unmoved since 2011, and the same maple tree outside my old bedroom window, now bare and brittle. I balanced a container of still warm blueberry scones in one hand, nudged the car door shut with my hip, and walked up the short path lined with dry leaves the wind hadn't yet swept away. The door was unlocked. It always was. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and butter, but it didn't feel warm. Alyssa's voice rang sharp and clear from the dining room, already mid-performance. I slipped off my shoes, straightened the green scarf around my neck, the one Mom gave me 5 years ago in a rare moment of something like guilt, and stepped inside. "Hey," Alyssa tossed toward me without turning her head. Her wine glass was already half full. She was perched in her usual spot beside Mom, one ankle crossed over the other, gesturing as she talked about a new office opening in Portland. No one stood up. No one reached for the scones. Dad was at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on the tablet like he was reviewing quarterly numbers, not sitting at his own kitchen table. I hovered near the edge and gently slid the plate between the teapot and the butter dish. "Blueberry," I said, softer than I meant to. "Still warm." No one responded. Alyssa was mid-sentence about a client dinner, and Dad nodded the way he does when he's only pretending to listen. I waited. I looked for a pause. When one came, I leaned in slightly. "So?" "I had my opening last Friday." Dad blinked. "My solo exhibit. At the gallery downtown. Over 200 guests. The Tribune even ran a piece on it." Alyssa lifted her hand mid-sip. "Wait, Dad, tell them about the investor, the Rotary guy. You said he sounded huge." He shifted in his chair, leaned back slightly. "Oh, yeah, good kid. Reminds me of someone who listens." I closed my mouth. The scones were cooling. My hands were sweating inside my sleeves. "I just thought it was—" I began again, but Mom cut in. "You've always been so performative," she said lightly, "even as a child. You don't need a crowd to be proud of yourself, sweetie." Performative. That word clanged in my chest like a fork hitting tile. I stared at her as she sipped her tea without looking at me. I bit the inside of my cheek. The room seemed to hush, but not for me. Then Dad, in the same even tone he used when explaining tax law to clients, said, "We weren't ready for a third child. It was too much. That's not your fault, but it changed everything." He didn't look up. His voice was calm, practiced. Like this was just another fact. I waited. For someone, Alyssa, Mom, anyone to laugh. To say he was joking. To say he didn't mean it that way. No one did. Alyssa buttered her toast. Mom folded her napkin with care. I stood. The chair legs screeched against the floor like protest. "I need some air." The hallway was dim, the old carpet familiar beneath my feet. I walked it slowly, as if I were retracing a path I used to know. My fingers brushed the edge of the photo wall out of habit. I hadn't looked at it in years. There were new frames now. Alyssa's wedding in Vermont, her husband smiling too wide, their baby, chubby and bald, Mom and Dad by the lake last fall, wine glasses raised, Evan, our older brother, in his lab coat, grinning beside a science fair poster. I searched. Once. Twice. My photo, the one from college graduation with the crooked cap and Dad's hand awkwardly resting on my shoulder, was gone. In its place was a faint square on the wall, a pale outline where it used to hang. The dust didn't lie. Something in my knees gave. I pressed my hand against the wallpaper, breathing through my nose. No tears. Not here. Not again. I turned toward the door. The scarf slid loose from my shoulder as I reached for my coat. I picked it up carefully, as if even the thread remembered what it was supposed to mean. Outside, the air hit sharper than I expected. I zipped my coat to the neck, fingers trembling slightly. "They don't regret me," I whispered, just loud enough for the wind to hear. "They regret who I became." I stepped off the porch, scone still untouched behind me, and walked back toward my car. The street was quiet. The world unchanged, but something in me had shifted, just slightly, like the way cold settles into your bones when you weren't expecting it, but then you realize maybe you were. They'd reserved a private room, but the table set for me was tucked near the play corner, next to a shelf of crayons and half-torn coloring books. I paused when the hostess pointed it out. "I'm with the Chen party," I said carefully, unsure if there had been some mistake. She checked her tablet. "Yes, of course. You're right here, Miss Lauren, listed under the smaller table." I looked again. The other table, long and gleaming, centerpiece already glowing with glass and silver, was being filled with familiar laughter and polished voices. 10 seats. My parents, Alyssa, her husband, Uncle Lou, and Aunt Rena, and a few cousins. Alyssa's baby stroller was already angled neatly into the side. Beside it, her toddler smacked a spoon rhythmically against the table, the only thing grounding me in sound. I took my seat by the children's corner. The chair wobbled slightly, and the napkin on my plate had a fold mark across it, like it had been reused. I tried not to overthink it. Maybe it was a miscommunication, a late RSVP, but somewhere beneath my ribs, I knew better. The last time I felt like this, I was 9. I'd been hiding behind the curtain in our old kitchen, waiting for Mom to finish up so I could ask to open my second birthday gift early. But I stopped when I heard her whisper, "We should have stopped at 2. I don't have it in me to keep faking." Dad's voice had followed, resigned. "Too late now. Just don't let her feel it." That memory returned now, not as a thought, but as a feeling. That strange blend of knowing and hoping you're wrong. Margaret stood to give a toast once everyone had settled. "To Alyssa," she began, holding her glass just right. "Our pride, regional director finally, and to Mace and his engagement. We couldn't be prouder. Truly, you two are the joy of our lives." Cheers, clinking glasses, a smile that stretched from table end to table end. I raised my mimosa and sipped. No one looked over. No one gestured for me to join. There were only 9 names spoken. Mine wasn't one of them. I stared into the pale orange drink until it shimmered. The noise of utensils and jazz blended into a soft, dull hum. When I couldn't hold my breath anymore, I stood up and walked quietly to the restroom. The lights inside were too bright. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Same blouse, same scarf, same polite expression I'd worn since childhood. Even here, I thought, I'm positioned to vanish. I splashed water on my hands and dried them slowly, pressing each finger like it mattered. Then I walked back, hoping to slide in unnoticed. Alyssa caught me as I passed. She leaned slightly, smile pristine. "You know they only invited you so you wouldn't ruin the photos, right?" Her tone was casual, as if she were pointing out a smudge on my cheek or a hair out of place. I didn't respond. I just looked at her and nodded once. I didn't give her the win of surprise. Back at my table, my food had arrived. Barely warm eggs Benedict, one yolk already broken. I didn't eat. I reached for my phone instead, needing something to anchor me. That's when the notification buzzed. Subject: updated trust structure. Carver Holdings. My thumb hovered over the preview. The sender was a law firm I vaguely recognized from Dad's real estate ventures. I opened it. No greeting, just bullet points. Effective immediately per amended trust filed March 2021. Alyssa Chen designated sole trustee. Lauren Chen removed from beneficiary list. Lake Eden property transferred under full fiduciary control of Alyssa Chen. My breath caught. For a moment, the edges of the room softened. The toddler was still banging his spoon. Margaret was sipping coffee with a lemon wedge twist. No one else noticed the weight that had just dropped onto my chest. There it was. Not implied, not symbolic, not a feeling to brush off. Just words. Cold. Final. Legal. I looked down at my plate again. The scone I hadn't touched crumbled slightly at the edge, as if it understood. They hadn't just left me out emotionally. They'd erased me, properly, officially, on paper, and I hadn't even seen it coming. I scrolled to the end of the email. There was a final line, filed with cooperation and approval of current family representatives. My fingers went cold. The air in the cafe felt suddenly thin. They had done it while smiling at me, while thanking me for blueberry scones, while inviting me to brunches just far enough away from the real table. Alyssa turned to raise her glass again. To new beginnings, she beamed. I stayed quiet. I stared straight ahead, not at them, not at my screen. Somewhere in the middle. As I blinked, one line from the email pulsed in my mind, over and over, in bold black font. Alyssa Chen, sole trustee, Lake Eden Estate. I opened the storage unit with a shaky breath, the key cold in my hand. Dust floated in the narrow beams of fluorescent light, making the whole place feel like a time capsule that had never asked to be opened. I hadn't stepped foot in here for over 2 years, maybe more. Against the far wall, stacked beneath a moth-eaten blanket, were the bins marked TAX PROPERTY OLD, my handwriting, still looped and careful from when I thought documentation could guarantee belonging. I dug past a stack of expired registration papers and art school brochures until I found it. A manila folder labeled in faded ink, Lake Eden, contribution docs. Inside, creased and slightly curled, were the receipts, copies of wire transfers, and a single notarized letter with all 3 of our names on it, mine, Richard's, and Margaret's, dated June 2012, $43,000, every cent I had back then. My chest tightened. I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, the cold biting through my jeans. I didn't cry. Instead, I took a photo of the document and emailed it to myself. Then I called Thomas Avery. He answered on the 3rd ring. Lauren Chen, he said gently, like I was still 9 years old and had just scraped my knee. Been a while. I need to confirm something. The 2021 Trust Amendment. Did I approve that? There was a pause. Papers shuffled in the background. Well, he began slowly, your signature wasn't on it, but I was told you'd given verbal approval. I had no reason to think otherwise. I didn't. Another pause, longer this time. You weren't present. In fact, I remember you were in the hospital that month. I exhaled, not because I was relieved, but because I'd been holding that breath for almost a year without knowing it. Do you still have the original 2012 letter? Yes, he said, and it's valid. Thank you, I replied. That's all I needed. The room I'd recovered in that year, post-surgery, post-impact, post-too much, came back to me in flashes. White walls, a plastic pitcher of water that never seemed cold, a dry get-well card-taped slant on the counter. The only handwriting was from Nora. No flowers, no visits, just a text from my mother the 2nd day. We're managing things. Focus on healing. At the time, I told myself it was reasonable. Everyone was busy. Finances were tight. I had always made excuses easier than I made requests, but now I saw it for what it was. That week, when I was doped on IV drips and blank stares, they rewrote the future. Neatly, legally, without me. I paced my living room before calling Alyssa. I thought I might rehearse something. but by then my anger had calcified. When she answered, her voice was half performative warmth, half irritation. "You know what this is about," I said. There was a pause. Then she said too sweetly, "Lauren, we did what was best for everyone. Number you did what was best for you." Her voice tightened. "You weren't even responsive. It wasn't safe to keep you involved." I was healing, not dead. Alyssa scoffed, that old sound of superiority she wore like a scent. "You're always so sensitive. And you're always so good at disappearing the parts of the story that make you uncomfortable." She didn't respond. I added, "You made decisions that legally affect me. Without my consent, that's not a family discussion, that's fraud." She hissed through her teeth. "You're seriously going to bring lawyers into this?" "I already have," I said, and hung up. I turned off my phone and walked to the kitchen. Maya was staring out the window now, arms folded, face unreadable. "They don't get to ghost me," I said softly. "Not anymore." Maya's voice was quiet. "Then stop letting them edit your chapters." That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid out every piece of paper on the floor, the original contribution, the voided trust, my signature from 2012. I studied them like sacred text, because they were, not just proof of money, proof of presence. And I realized, for all their claims of loving me, what they loved was my silence. But that part of me was done. And what replaces it would not ask for approval. It would demand space. I sat back on the carpet, spine against the wall, and whispered aloud what had begun taking shape since brunch. "If they want war," I said, "they forgot who helped build their fort." My voice didn't shake. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just sat with it. And for the first time, it didn't feel like grief. It felt like strategy. The sky was already heavy by the time I pulled into the driveway. Thick clouds sat low, pressing down on the house like it owed them something. I turned off the engine but didn't move, just sat there, hands resting on the manila folder in my lap, breathing through the weight in my chest. I wasn't here for coffee. I wasn't here to smooth things over. I came to return the favor. The front door opened before I knocked. Margaret stood in the frame, her expression unreadable. Maybe she'd been watching through the blinds. "Lauren," she said like I was a misplaced package, "you didn't say you were coming." "No," I replied. "I didn't." Inside, the air was muggy. The ceiling fan ticked rhythmically overhead, struggling to stir the stillness. On the table sat 4 glasses of iced coffee, condensation already pooling underneath. Alyssa was leaning against the counter, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smirked. "Wow, no text, no call, bold." I didn't answer. I placed the envelope on the table, centered it between the coasters and the sugar jar, and took the seat closest to the window. Richard was in his usual chair, eyes on the fan, but he turned just enough to acknowledge me with a quiet, tired nod. Alyssa walked over, eyeing the envelope like it might contain coupons. "Is this about the trust? Again?" I didn't flinch. "You altered it while I was in the hospital." "We acted for the family," she said, shrugging. "You were unstable. I mean, you barely knew what month it was." I opened the envelope and slid out the original notarized contribution letter, the one from 2012 with all our names. I laid it flat, smoothing the creases with the side of my hand. I wasn't unstable. I was recovering. There's a difference. Richard rubbed his forehead. Margaret didn't sit. She stayed standing, arms crossed, fingers tight around her teacup. "This isn't necessary," she said softly. "It is," I replied. "You told me I'd always have a home at Lake Eden. That was a lie. You replaced presence with paperwork and called it protection." Alyssa scoffed. "You're being so dramatic." "No," I said, voice level. "I'm being direct. This is a copy of my contribution. This," I pulled out the amendment dated 2021, "is the document that removed me. And this," I placed a letter from my attorney on top, "is notice of mediation." The room went still, Even the fan sounded louder. Margaret's face didn't move, but her eyes did, flicking toward Richard, who said nothing. Alyssa picked up the packet and flipped through it with theatrical boredom. "You're serious?" I nodded. "Dead serious. No judge is going to side with you." "We'll see." She looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time, her confidence cracked just slightly. I stood slowly. "I'm not asking you anymore. I'm not begging for space. I'm taking it back." I didn't sit back down. I let the silence spread across the room like smoke. Margaret cleared her throat. "Lauren, honey, let's not escalate this. Families, we go through things. We say things we don't mean." I turned toward her. "You meant it. You just never thought I'd have the nerve to bring it back in writing." Richard finally spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "You know this doesn't change anything. We're still your family." "Then maybe you should have acted like it." I looked at him, not with anger, but with a kind of sad clarity. For years he had chosen to be the wall I could lean against, but never one that bent. His silence had always been louder than anyone's words. Alyssa tossed the envelope down on the table. "This is what you want? To drag this through court? For what? Principle?" "For truth," I said, "and for the version of me you kept trying to write out." The room felt smaller now, like the house had contracted around the weight of what had just been named. "I didn't come here to fight," I added. "I came here to reclaim what's mine." Outside, a lawnmower buzzed in the distance, faint and indifferent. The world, as always, kept moving. I reached for the doorknob. My hand was steady. No part of me hesitated. From behind me, I heard a chair shift. Richard, maybe, but no footsteps followed. I stepped out into the thick afternoon air, the door clicking shut behind me with a softness that felt too final to be accidental. The porch steps creaked under my weight. I looked out at the lawn where I once helped rake leaves every fall, where Dad once told me that hard work always earned its place. Apparently not in this family. I didn't rush to my car. I let the heat wrap around me. I let the silence stretch. By the time I reached my car, the sky had shifted. Clouds darker, heavier, as if holding back something overdue. I sat behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. My eyes drifted back to the front porch. No one watched. No one opened the door. And somehow, that hurt less than it used to, because I wasn't surprised anymore. "You'll always have a home at Lake Eden," Mom once whispered the night I wired the $43,000. She'd said it like a vow. But what is a home if it only exists in language, never in reality? That house, this family, had become a museum of curated affection. Their love depended on who was watching, what it cost, and how quiet you stayed. As I pulled away from the curb, I passed the side of the house where the garden used to bloom. It was overgrown now. Vines choked the fence, and I wondered if they noticed, or if they had grown so used to appearances they stopped seeing anything real. Back at my apartment, I carried the folder inside like it was something sacred. I didn't toss it onto the counter. I placed it down gently. The iced coffee I'd left that morning was still sitting on the table, now watered down and sweating through the paper sleeve. I picked it up, took one long sip, and stared at my own reflection in the microwave door. No cracks, no tremble, no apologies. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about memory, ownership, history, and I had finally taken mine back. I hadn't worn the scarf in years, soft green wool frayed just slightly at the edges. It still smelled faintly like cinnamon and dryer sheets. My mother gave it to me 5 Christmases ago, wrapped without a card, handed over with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Back then, I tucked it away, unsure if it was an apology or a placeholder. Today, I wore it, not for warmth, not for her, but because sometimes you have to carry the things you've outgrown, just once more to let them go. Harmony Commons wasn't glamorous. A community hall with folding chairs and mismatched tablecloths, the kind of place where bake sales happened and book clubs met on weekday evenings. But to me, it felt like a stage. And tonight, every creak of the linoleum floor sounded like it might echo for years. Maya gave me a small nod from the back row as I stepped to the mic. Her crossword puzzle sat folded in her lap, but her eyes were fully on me. I looked out at the room, mostly women, a few men, older faces, some younger ones leaning forward. No one spoke. They didn't have to. I began. I used to think that being agreeable meant I'd be accepted, that if I didn't complain, if I showed up with baked goods and polite smiles, I'd eventually be seen. I paused. A few people nodded. My name is Lauren Chen. I'm an artist, a daughter, and, for most of my life, someone who tried not to take up too much space. I reached into the folder I had brought. Slowly, deliberately, I unfolded a worn piece of lined paper. The ink was smudged in one corner. I wrote this when I was 11. Someday, I'll matter. I'll be good enough that no one regrets me. I didn't look up. Not yet. My family didn't yell or throw things. Their cruelty was quieter. Erasure. Dressed as indifference. Exclusion. Masked as order. They said they loved me, but only in the past tense. Only in revision. A ripple passed through the room, like everyone shifted in their seats at once, but didn't know why. Then, from the aisle, I saw a figure rise. Alyssa, hair perfect, posture sharper, smile already fixed in place. "I'm sorry," she said, approaching the mic. "I wasn't planning to speak, but I think some context is important here." I stepped back. "She's been under a lot of stress," Alyssa continued, her voice polished. "After her accident, there were complications. Her memory doesn't always match up. We all love her, truly. But sometimes love means setting boundaries, even if they hurt." There was a pause. Not from her, from everyone else, the kind that dares you to pick a side. I stepped forward again. "She's right," I said. "I did break." A few murmurs. "And do you know why?" "Because I spent 28 years being edited out of my own life." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I folded the journal page slowly and placed it on the podium. I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm here because sometimes silence becomes its own form of permission, and I'm done granting it. For a long second, no one moved. Then, from the front row, a woman, maybe late 60s, soft gray curls, leaned slightly toward the woman beside her and whispered not quietly. She said what we've all been too scared to. And the room exhaled. First a single clap, then another. Then the kind of applause that doesn't surge but spreads, like something catching fire in a quiet field. I stepped back from the mic, nodding slightly. Maya smiled from the back, her hands folded over her crossword. Alyssa had returned to her seat, face unreadable. I didn't linger. I collected my folder, the scarf now warm around my neck, and walked out into the night. The air smelled faintly of late summer tomatoes and sidewalk heat. My heels echoed gently against the pavement as I made my way to the car. Later that night, after the adrenaline wore off and the house was quiet again, I checked my phone. One new email from Arthur LaRue. Subject: Your father left something behind. No body text, just an attachment and a line. He asked that I share this with you. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the screen, then at the scarf I'd draped across the back of my chair. A goodbye gift I'd finally put to use, on my own terms. I reached for a glass of water, the cold bite grounding me. Something was shifting. Not loud, not sudden, but permanent. On the drive home, the city lights passed like soft punctuation, yellow halos around street lamps, a blur of neon from a late-night diner. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence felt earned. I thought about that scarf again, the one I'd avoided for so long. It was never really about the fabric. It was about the space it occupied in the drawer, the unspoken plea folded inside it. Stay quiet, stay kind, stay small. Tonight I wore it like armor, and then I let it go. I draped it on the back of the living room chair, not to preserve it, but to release it. It didn't belong to the Lauren I was becoming. I finally opened the email. The attachment was a scanned letter, dated months ago. My father's handwriting, more slanted than I remembered, but unmistakably his. I never said it out loud, he wrote, but you were the one who stayed standing. When things fell apart, you didn't scream. You just held us up. I blinked, slowly, let the words settle. I regret many things, but not you. There was no closing, no apology, just that one line, centered on the page like it had been waiting for years to be said. My hands didn't shake. I printed the letter and placed it beside the journal page I had read hours earlier. The child who once wrote, "Someday I'll matter," was finally answered, not by validation, but by recognition. I poured a fresh glass of water and stepped out onto the small balcony. The city buzzed softly beneath me. A breeze tugged gently at my sleeves. Inside, the folder still sat on the table. Evidence, story, truth. But tonight, I didn't need to reread it. I had spoken, and I had been heard. Peace isn't inherited, it's built. I kept whispering that line to myself as I drove through the winding October roads toward Lake Eden. The trees wore gold and fire. Leaves drifted across the windshield like soft reminders that some things let go beautifully. Thomas Avery waited for me at the cafe off Highway 28. He wore the same tan coat he always did, and his voice was just as quiet as the day he confirmed what had been taken from me. "This came 2 weeks after the last time you saw him," he said, sliding the envelope across the table. "It's all in there, his final amendment. Signed, notarized, unprompted." I didn't open it. Not there. I just nodded. "Thank you." He paused. "He wrote you a letter, too. Said it wasn't to make up for things, just to say them right." The envelope was heavy in my hands, like memory had weight. I didn't go straight to the cabin. I stopped at their house. One last delivery. Margaret opened the door, same composed expression. She looked at the envelope, then back at me. "It's yours," I said, offering it. "He signed it before he passed. It's not mine to explain." She didn't take it right away. Richard stepped into the doorway behind her. His eyes dropped the moment he saw me. He took the envelope gently, almost reverently, and for the first time in years, I saw something crack. Not in his voice. He didn't speak, but in his shoulders. They folded inward. The kind of grief that doesn't beg forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Margaret remained still, arms crossed, unmoved. I didn't stay. Lake Eden was quiet when I arrived. A light fog hovered over the water, the way it always did mid-October. The cabin smelled like old wood and cinnamon. I opened the windows, brewed tea, and unpacked the last box I hadn't touched in years. Inside, I found the red ribbon. Frayed, soft, looped around nothing. It used to bind my childhood journals. Now it sat in my palm like a closing circle. I walked to the fireplace and set 2 things on the mantel. A photo of me at 8 holding a red notebook and a torn page that once made me cry. I just wanted to be enough. I framed it, not because it hurt me anymore, but because it reminded me of everything I survived. That night, I lit a fire in the small hearth and finally opened the letter Thomas had given me. My father's handwriting was still careful, still oddly formal. "Lauren," it began, "you were never meant to be forgotten. I don't know why it took me this long to understand what silence costs." He didn't explain. He didn't list regrets. But near the bottom, one line stood alone. "You were the one who never left, even when we acted like you had." I read it twice, then a third time slower, and I let myself cry. Not for sorrow, but for the version of me that waited decades to be acknowledged, not as a problem, not as a shadow, but as a daughter. Later, I swept the floors of the cabin. I wiped down windows, rearranged mugs, not to impress anyone, just to claim space. The silence here wasn't empty. It was mine. I pressed the red ribbon flat between my palms, then looped it gently around the spine of a new journal. First page blank. No promises, no expectations, just the weight of my own breath. The next morning, I arrived early at the community center, my first creative writing class, a circle of teenagers, dry erase boards, scent of markers and curiosity. They stared, unsure. I smiled. A girl named Lily raised her hand slowly, 15 maybe, round glasses, quiet voice. "Does it ever stop hurting?" I didn't rush the answer. "Not always," I said, "but it stops defining you." She nodded, and I saw something shift behind her eyes, something steady. That evening, I sat on the porch with a mug of cinnamon tea. The lake shimmered. Leaves whispered across the deck. I opened a blank notebook. No drama, no performance, just presence. And in a voice just above a whisper, I said it aloud. I'm not starting over. I'm starting forward. Sitting on that porch, with the lake breathing quietly before me and a warm cup in hand, I realized peace doesn't arrive. It's something we choose, one page, one boundary, one breath at a time. For years, I thought love had to be earned with silence and sacrifice. But sometimes, choosing yourself is the truest form of reconciliation. In this life, not all apologies are spoken, and not all families learn to see you. But healing begins when you stop waiting for permission to exist. If this story touched something in you, I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts. We all carry something. Maybe sharing helps us carry it better.